is amazing stuff. Good evening to you and welcome to the program. First, one of the worst cases of bank bastardry you'll ever see. Now, the NAB likes to boast about how it supports small business in this country, yet it had no hesitation in putting to the sword 3 of its customers who'd done nothing wrong. And even when the bank had to concede it made a terrible mistake, it still took them to the cleaners. Frank Pangallo has been investigating the NAB and this case for the last 3 years.
These people are hoodlums in suits, basically.
At NAB, we know that give and take is the thing that drives our most successful relationships.
Well, you know what they say about the banks being bastards. This is the biggest bastard act that you can ever imagine.
More give, less take.
By its own excessive standards, it hasn't been a good year for the NAB. Its profit for the first 6 months is only a lazy $2.1 billion, down about 21%.
I don't know how they can keep doing business the way they are, and I don't know how the government will allow them, or the ACCC will allow them to do that.
They've also just lost a landmark court case. Tonight, after a 6-year fight, the shocking story can now be told about the NAB's despicable conduct against 3 battlers who refused to yield to their low tactics.
What have you made of their conduct in this whole thing?
Well, in my point of view, I mean, I think they were deliberately trying to get us down.
You're angry at the NAB, aren't you?
Of course, not angry. I hate NAB now because they killed my life.
And their refusal to fix the damage they'd done when found out to be wrong.
Well, they deliberately overcharged us, and when they realised that they had made a mistake, they just wanted to kill us off. They didn't want us to exist.
Business partners Aussie Inac, Mehmet K and Mehmet Canley had borrowed $1.15 million from the NAB in 2003 to buy and develop a property at Auburn in Sydney's inner west. They signed this contract with the bank. The conditions couldn't be clearer.
The conditions of the contract was we were to pay 5.65 fixed term interest rate for a period of 1 year. And after the first year, when the loan expired, it automatically renewed to the second year term lease.
The terms also included a default interest rate of 4% to be added to that fixed rate of 5.65%.
If you missed a payment, you would have...
At the maximum, we should have been charged at 9.65% default rate.
Now, you didn't have a problem in that first year, did you?
We didn't have a problem in the first year, no. But in saying so, the contract said our interest rate was 5.65, but funny enough, when our first payment came, our statement showed as being they were charging us 5.85%.
What, when your first payment was made?
Yes.
So they'd already increased it?
They'd already increased it without even telling us.
So the NAB was already in breach of the contract, but Aussie says it slipped their notice and they kept their payments up to date while getting development plans approved for their site.
We looked at the market and we thought, well, it's probably time to sell without building, and we put the property on the market as a DA-approved site.
But things were about to get worse for them. While they were negotiating to sell the land for $1.75 million, the NAB didn't keep its end of the bargain. Instead of rolling over the loan on the same terms as agreed, they immediately jacked up the interest rate first to 19.65%, then to a colossal 20.35% on the approval of Peter Hatter, the Senior Manager of Strategic Banking Services.
Well, the payment was about $6,500 to $21,000, or just over $20,000.
And that put a lot of pressure on you?
It did. We just could not afford it.
And when you pointed out to them that they'd made a mistake, were they willing to listen?
Made numerous phone calls, tried to resolve the issue, had our solicitors acting at the time write to them and pointing out the issue, and they just wouldn't budge. They just could not budge.
Not only wouldn't they budge, Mr. Hatter claimed in this letter to them in April 2005 that they were entitled to charge the higher rate because it was in the loan agreement.
But they got it wrong, didn't they?
100% wrong, because I looked at the contract say 565, if I'm default, I'm not, but say for example I'm default, 4%. If 4% plus 565 is 9.65, but you charge me 19.65.
In mid-2005, the NABs seized the property, then froze Aussie Inac's personal bank accounts and placed a caveat on his home.
And I rang him up and I said, Mr. Hatter, I said, I can't go into the bank and pay my mortgage off because my accounts are frozen. And he said, well, yes, we want your property. I said, well, my property isn't associated with anything. He said, well, there's only a shortfall in it and we want your property to make up for the shortfall.
Things got even nastier after Aussie refused a written demand to hand over his house keys to the bank and move out within 7 days. Mr. Hatter then sent a locksmith one night to change the locks.
And I said, mate, I'll give you 5 seconds to walk out of here.
What authority did the NAB have to send a locksmith around to change the locks on your house? What, they wanted you to get out that night?
Yes. Well, I had visitors there and it was an embarrassing moment. It was very embarrassing at the time.
Did they have a court order? Or
No, they had no court orders.
Nothing?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Then, after ignoring their claims for more than 2 years, Mr. Hatter finally conceded he'd made a mistake.
The two of us went to the bank, had a meeting, and he said, guys, we're sorry about the problems. We've lost the contracts and we didn't know what was happening.
Can you believe a bank the size of the NAB could lose paperwork for a loan worth in excess of $1 million?
Yes, they lost the contracts, and that was Mr. Hatter's words, that they had lost the contracts, and they contacted Mr. Carter, who was our former solicitor, and got a copy of the contracts from him. And as soon as they saw the contracts, they said, well, made an error, we reduced the interest rate down. Okay, we'll give you 7 days to pay off.
Regardless of this admission, the bank pressed ahead with its legal action, eventually selling the property for $1.2 million in 2007, less than the offer the partners say they had before the trouble started. The new owner built several units on it, realising a handsome profit, much to the anger and disappointment of Aussie and his partners, who were told they still owed the bank another $150,000. But more about that later.
At this time, we'd actually lost virtually everything. I've lost 2 businesses that I had, and almost lost my house, and borrowed extra money on the house, and went to two different mortgages. And I said, well, what about our losses? And we said, well, it's happened. We can't do anything about it. Sorry.
They spend a fortune, probably more than any other company in Australia, on public relations, do good community activities, but behind the scenes, it's this dark side of their personality. And frankly, there is a corporate culture there which refuses to mend its ways.
Associate Professor Evan Jones from Sydney University's Political Economy Department has written several case studies on bank bastardry, many of them the NAB.
Any point fighting them?
No, in general, because the costs, the monetary costs and the psychological costs are just enormous, and you rarely do you have any competent and committed assistance.
And the banks know this, don't they?
Absolutely,
they know that.
They know the lot, which is why they will pursue you to the end. Yes.
The Leviathan Bank threw every legal obstacle it could find in their way, but they refused to give in.
Pretty tough trying to deal with a bank like that, isn't it?
It is very tough. I mean, I don't wish that on my worst enemy, to be honest. I don't wish that on my worst enemy.
The income from Mehmet Ali K's small kebab shop in Sydney's George Street paid for much of their enormous legal bills. It runs 24/7 and is just a few blocks from the NAB's glistening skyscraper headquarters.
Before I'm going to get the loan from the NAB, I got a very good life. I have a very good income. I got very nice house. I have a very good name in the Turkish community, and everyone called me the king of the kebab man. I was very good man, very good family father, but now very angry.
They've embarrassed us, humiliated us, and cost us a lot of money, but we're still fighting. And we'll keep fighting until we prove justice.
Well, they did get justice, recently achieving a rare victory over a bank. New South Wales Supreme Court Judge Rothman found the NAB in breach of its contract from the very start, and that it had engaged in false, misleading and deceptive conduct. He awarded damages of $280,000, but not anywhere near enough for what they've gone through, say Aussie and Mehmet, who now suffers from severe depression.
We want a fair compensation of We actually want what we've lost back. The monies that we've lost, we want back. 7 years of stress and burden on the family.
As for that extra $150,000 the NAB was chasing, well, what emerged during the trial defies belief and should send shivers down the spine of any of their customers. Another NAB banker, Ian Rowe, told the court it was standard business practice when chasing its money to load on much more than was due, so the bank couldn't lose, with any surplus going back to the customer.
Because they think only the money, Frank. They don't care about the people's life. They suck our blood. They do too many mistakes, but they don't care about the people. They just only think about their money.
Sadly for ordinary people, our financial regulators shy away from taking on big banks and business found breaching the Trade Practices Act, as in this case, when Aussie approached the ACCC and ASIC with his damning judgment, they told him they weren't interested.
The ACCC, should they act in this case?
They should act in this case. Yeah, they should act in this case big time.
My personal view is that this responsibility should go back to the ACCC, which has a comprehensive brief for unconscionable conduct elsewhere.
How come I'm going back to my good life, okay?
But their fight goes on. They're going to appeal the damages amount and sue the NAB for the 6 years of pain they all endured.
They want to think only the profit is profit. But money is not important than the person that is my life, you know?
We wanted to prove that we're right. All these years the banks have been sort of trying to get over people and trying to do the wrong thing by the people. And I'm sure if everyone calculated looked at their statements now, you know, they would find that the banks are still making errors and they're still ripping them off one way or another.
It's called taking responsibility. At NAB, more take, less give.